Great. Good morning, everyone. Dobro jutro, dobro utro. A very warm welcome to today's webinar. I am Shira Putrinda, Lead Sustainability and Digitalization at the Swiss Import Promotion Program, and it is my absolute pleasure to open this session with you today. First, I would like to thank you, our SIPO colleagues in Serbia and North Macedonia, for bringing this webinar together. It's also great to see the strong collaboration between our partner business support organizations, BSOs, the Economic Chamber of North Macedonia, and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Serbia. They are working jointly on this important topic and inviting relevant companies. On behalf of SIPO, we truly appreciate your cooperation and commitment. So, for exporters, sustainable packaging is actually becoming a requirement for accessing the EU markets. With the EU's Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, PPWR, that is coming into force this August 2026, the shifts is becoming more tangible. And also, at the same time, this transition brings the opportunity for you. Companies that start early by improving their packaging, strengthening the data, and understanding life cycle impacts can potentially position themselves as reliable, future-ready partners for Swiss and European importers looking for compliant and sustainable supply chains. At SIPO, we support our partner BSOs in strengthening their export promotion service so companies can continue accessing international markets and meet evolving requirements. To our BSOs partners, you play a key role in making this transition work in practice for the company's SMEs members that you support. And to support you in this role, today's session focuses on moving from awareness to practical understanding of PPWR and how your member companies can start preparing now. Thank you again for your strong commitment, and I wish you a very insightful and practical session today. Thank you also to the Economic Chamber of North Macedonia and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Serbia for gathering your members today. And to guide us through this topic, we are very pleased to have with us Laura from Qantas today. She has more than 17 years of experience in packaging and plastics. Laura also has worked closely with companies across industry and helped them to design more resilient and sustainable packaging solutions. Her work today focuses strongly on eco-design and also on navigating the evolving PPWR. Laura, we're really happy to have you today, so over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this introduction. So I'm sharing now my screen, and I will put it also full screen soon. So let me just put it full screen. Okay, so you should see my screen now. If it's not the case, please let me know. But I'm okay. Thanks, Shira. So I'm very happy actually to be there today and to introduce you to this new packaging regulation that we have in Europe. We have a full agenda actually. So I will present you in details what is this packaging and packaging waste regulation. I plan spending around 80 minutes just on this, but the most important thing that you have enough time also to ask your questions. So I would like really to give you at least 30 minutes at the end to have an open Q&A and interactive discussions. Just for your information, so as a next step, I will also give you a short introduction about what are the next steps, because indeed there are some visits on site that are planned. So I will spend roughly 10 minutes on this, not more, but still, again, so as I said, the most important part is at the end. What I always say during this training webinar about PPWR is that PPWR is a great regulation. We have a lot of content behind. That's why I need to spend so much time, 80 minutes, to go through PPWR. But still, there are a lot of things that are unknown, unfortunately, because we are expecting many delegated acts in the coming years. So it might be that actually I will not have the answers to all your questions, simply because the European Commission has not provided us with the answer yet. Before actually starting, let me just introduce you very quickly who Quantis is, in case you have never heard about us. We are a sustainability consulting company. We have offices in Europe and in US. In Europe, we are present indeed in Switzerland, where I'm based, but we have also offices in Paris, in Milan, and in Berlin, in Germany. And we work really with many companies from different sectors, from food, cosmetic, personal care, and fashion sectors. And we help them really to define their sustainability strategies. So as Shira anticipated, my role in Quantis is really working on circularity, on packaging eco-design, but we have really teams working on carbon, corporate footprint, on nature assessment, and also on communication. So we really work with companies from A to Z, starting from their assessment until really supporting them also in external communication and digitalization towards sustainability. So this was just to give you really a very short introduction, but now let's start with the main topic of today, which is indeed the PPWR. And let's start with really by giving you a brief introduction about what is PPWR. So probably you have already heard about this regulation because it was published in December 2024. So it's a regulation, it's not a directive. It means that it's applied, it's a legally binding regulation, and it applies immediately in all European countries. And it entered into force actually already in 2024, but the first target is really this year, quite soon, in August 2026. The goal of this PPWR is really to work on different areas. So by defining really targets on recyclability, on recycled content, on reusability of packaging, also on compostability of packaging, on packaging minimization. There are also some single-use plastic that are banned in Europe. It provides requirements on labeling. And then finally, the main goal of this PPWR is really to harmonize. And that's good actually because today in Europe we have many extended producer responsibility. Each one is different, has different fees, has different rules. For instance, in France we have CTO, in Spain we have Ecoembes, in Italy we have Conai, and all companies selling in those different countries, they have to follow different rules, which is not really easy. So the goal of this regulation is also to harmonize all the rules across different EPR and to push for the development of a more deposit return scheme. So the so-called DRS. These are schemes that really, let's say, motivate people, consumers, to take back their packaging because the packaging is usually collected in supermarkets and they give a small fee, a small budget in return. And so this helps really to increase actually the collection rate. And then this budget, and then also it helps already to collect also money to favor the development of the recycling stream in different countries. So in some European countries, we have already the DRS scheme, not in all countries. So the goal is really to harmonize, to spread this DRS through all the European countries. These two, I mean, EPR and DRS, I mean, in my opinion, they are really good things for companies because this, I mean, the aim is really to facilitate also your life by harmonizing rules. But at the same time, PPWR, on one side, it's facilitating your life. On the other side, it's complicated a bit your life because we will see there are many targets. Then I move to the next slide, and here it's really to the goal here is really to give you an overview about the main articles on really the definition about packaging and all to this definition of packaging because it's key in PPWR. But first, on this slide, let me just say that PPWR applies to all packaging sold in Europe. So it does not only apply to plastics, but also all materials, all packaging, primary, secondary, tertiary. So it means also the logistic packaging. And it applies to all products put on the European market. So that's, I mean, the scope is very, very large. And packaging shall be placed on the market. And of course, there are penalties. We don't know yet what are these penalties, but PPWR for the moment it says that there will be penalties, there will be controls done by the European Commission, and in case indeed it's not compliant, so penalties apply. And then it's really up, I mean, how much is the penalty is really also up to the member state to set fines and to define really the amount of these penalties. For the moment, so as I said, we don't know yet. Probably this is something that... Now, what is packaging? So it's here we have the definition as provided by PPWR. As I said, I have also a specific slide really only on this definition because it's very, very important. So what PPWR says that packaging means an item that is intended to be used by an economic operator for the containment, protection, handling, delivery, or presentation of products to another economic operator or to an end user. So we have to keep in mind these words: containment, protection, handling, delivery, or presentation. I'm saying this because sometimes packaging, I mean, it's obvious what is packaging, but in other cases, it's not so obvious. So I have really questions from my clients where really we are not sure whether this is a product or a packaging. And so we have raised those questions to the European Commission. We are still waiting for the answers, but this is just to say, for instance, if we consider the CD covers, well, in this case, we know that the cover of the CD is not considered packaging; it's part of the product. This is clearly written in PPWR. But for example, if we consider sunglasses cases. Let's assume so really sunglasses, branded sunglasses where you have also the cases. Usually that's something that consumers, they keep at home, indeed to continue to protect the sunglasses whenever they go outside. And so it's not clear whether this case is considered as a packaging or not. And for the moment, we have also different, by the way, opinions through by the EPR scheme in Europe. So for instance, Germany is considering it as a product. Italy is considering it as packaging. So that's really not helping companies, and it's still not clear for us. And that's, for instance, it's a question that we raised to European Commission, where we're still waiting for the answer. But we have many cases, unfortunately, like this. So that's why I will come back again to this definition in few minutes. So, I'm jumping then to the next slide. This slide is another very important slide. Because on this, we have an overview of all the targets, the main ones, actually. So the first targets, it start really this year. So by 12 August 2026, keep in mind that all packaging that will be put on the European Union will need to be provided together with a declaration of conformity. So you have to prepare this declaration of conformity for your packaging. This declaration of conformity, it's a document that says, in few words, that your packaging is compliant with PPWR. I will show you immediately after this slide exactly in more details what is this declaration of conformity. Then we have also one target that applies already starting from the 12th of August, which is related to the substances of concern. And these substances of concern are PFAS, but only for food packaging, and heavy metals. And in PPWR, you have targets for heavy metals and PFAS. And while heavy metals apply to all packaging, so the heavy metal targets, the PFAS target apply only to food packaging. And you have already to be compliant with this target on substances of concern starting from 12 of August 2026. It means that you have already to check whether that your packaging is not containing heavy metals and PFAS in a concentration which are higher than the targets set by PPWR. We will focus on this, of course, during the presentation. Then we have other targets. So by 12 August 2028, we have first target on labeling. So this indeed, the idea is really that labels on packaging are harmonized. And so these apply to both the packaging and also the waste bins, actually, that will be used in Europe. And we're still waiting. That's another example where we're still waiting for the delegated act, because actually we don't know yet what is the final version of the labels that can be displayed on packaging. We have a first idea, because there are some documents that are circulating, but still we don't have the final delegated act on this. And then the main targets, let me say also more based on what I've seen, really the most complicated targets for companies are coming starting from 2030. So 2030, you have targets on packaging minimization that will apply. You have targets on recycled content. You have also targets on reusable packaging. So these first targets on the reusability, they only apply to transport packaging and e-commerce. And then from 2030, you have also targets on recyclability. And in particular, in 2030, we speak about design for recyclability. So your packaging will need to be designed to be recyclable, and we will see also what it means to design to be recyclable. And so the European Commission, the PPWR, is defining different grades of recyclability. By 2030, packaging that it corresponds to grade D on design for recycling guidelines will not be able to be sold on the European market. And then by 2035, we have additional targets which apply to recyclability at scale requirements. So it means that in this case, if your packaging has any stream of collection of recycling in Europe, it shall not be put on the European market. And here we have a lot, of course, of question marks, because today, most of plastic packaging are not recyclable at scale in Europe. So now the big question is what will it happen to this plastic packaging like PS? So we don't know yet, but that's a target. So by 2035, only packaging that is recyclable at scale will be able to be sold in Europe. And then by 2038, all packaging that corresponds to grade C on design for recycling guidelines shall not be put on the European market. So in 2038, we have another target on design for recyclability, which is more stringent. And then we arrive in 2040, where we have other targets, more stringent targets, again on recycled content and on reuse targets. So as you see, many targets, but the first to keep in mind is that we are, so in 2026, sorry, we have this, so in few weeks, we have this first target that applies, and then we have the main really targets wave that is arriving from 2030. As I mentioned before, unfortunately, so in this PPWR, we have many things that are still unknown, simply because we are waiting for additional clarifications from European Commission that will come, but will come in the next years. European Commission plans to publish some delegated acts and other guidelines in the next years. The most important to keep in mind is that this year, 2026, we will have a delegated act on the labeling that will come, and we are definitely waiting for it because the first target on the labeling is already in 2028. So we need to understand what companies can put on their packaging, what type of labels they can put. By the end also of this year, we will have a delegated act on recycled content, in particular on how to, additional information about how we can calculate this recycled content. We have some information, of course, already in the regulation, but there are still some information which are not fully clear. So everything will be on recycled content should be clarified by the end of this year. Then next year, we have additional delegated act and guidelines on restrictions, weight reduction, reuse. The most, I would say, on this slide, the most important date for you to keep in mind actually is 2028, January 1st, we will have the recyclability guidelines from European Commission. Now, if you remember, the first target on the design for recyclability is already in 2030. So it means that you will have 2 years to be aligned. And that's clearly not enough. So my suggestion is already to start working today on your recyclability with the information that we have today in order already to identify the hotspot. And I will explain you also how you could do this. And then, of course, be ready that 1st of January 2028, there will be these official guidelines. And probably so you will need to update your recyclability assessment with these new official recommendation guidelines coming from the European Commission. 2029, we will have also a delegated act on recyclability scale. So these two actually, the one on design for recyclability and the one on recyclability at scale, I think that they are really the most weighted delegated acts because these are the two topics where we have more questions and that are most complicated, actually, the most complicated for companies. So we, in 2029, we will have additional information about what it means recyclability at scale, but in particular, how to consider, how to include actually those plastic material that don't have collection recyclability stream today in Europe. So how to handle them. Then we will have, as you see, so additional information, so documentation that will be published until 2034. So really until the end, actually. And that's, let me say that these, this uncertainty, the fact that we have we miss a lot of information that will become only in the next years. That's the most complicated part related to PPWR, because PPWR is setting really very ambitious targets, is asking to companies to work on topics that have never been actually discussed or checked or assessed before in some cases, and still we miss some information on how to assess them. But I can tell you, so okay, that's the complicated thing, but let's be positive. I'm working every day with companies on PPWR, so still you can start working today. Everything, I mean, every company has the same difficulties, of course, at the moment to try to align with the PPWR, but that's possible, and definitely you should really you have still time actually to start to work today on this regulation before the first deadline in 2026. I wanted to focus really on these key steps for this year, for the following weeks for you before August 2026. So by 12 August 2026, you have to buy for every packaging type that you place on the European market, you have to prepare two documents. One is the complete technical documentation, and then the other one is the European Declaration of Conformity. The technical documentation is really it's keeping actually together all the technical information related to packaging. So really you have to put together all the certification that you have, all the documentation related to bill of materials, all the tests that you have done, all the self-declaration that you must ask to your suppliers. And this will be, this technical documentation is a series of documents that will need to be kept internally. So you don't need to submit them. You keep them internally. You have to, of course, you have to track them and to store them somewhere, just in case there are any controls from the European Union. So just so you have to keep them in case there are some controls. But then what you have to submit, and then also to really to make available publicly, is the Declaration of Conformity. The Declaration of Conformity is very simple. It's one page signed by your company where you say, in few words, my packaging is compliant with PPWR. There is a template in the regulation that I'm going to show you. So that's something that first it's a document that it has to be public. It means that the idea is that you submit it. Now the question is where to submit, because there are still the EPRs in Europe are not ready actually for the submissions, so they have not put in place any digital system where you can submit declaration of conformity. So for the moment, it's still not clear where you have to submit. Some of my clients, they told me that they have already done, for instance, product declaration of conformity. So for products, that's something that you already have to do. So you have to do a declaration of conformity, and usually, so this is something that they publish on their website, or they keep internally in the digital system. And their idea is to do the same for the packaging declaration of conformity. But again, so as I said, so we are waiting for more information also from the EPRs about where to submit this declaration of conformity. And the most important thing is that you don't have to see this as a static document, because the declaration of conformity, the DOC, will be updated depending, in the coming years, as soon as we have new targets entering into force. So by 12 August, you have just to write in this DOC that your packaging is compliant with the targets on the substances of concern, which is the first target that we have this year. But then, so you need to say anything about the recyclability, the recycled content, so all the other targets that we have in PPWR. But of course, as soon as targets enter into force, you have also to write in the declaration of conformity that you are compliant with these targets. You don't have to show this in anything in the declaration of conformity. You have just to say, I'm compliant, but then behind the declaration of conformity, you have all the technical documentation to show that you are compliant with those targets. Then, so this is the first thing to do by 12th of August. Of course, behind this, so as I said, you have also this target on substances of concern, SOC, so you have to do an assessment and to check that in your packaging, indeed, you are below the targets of the chemicals as set in PPWR. Then you have also to identify, trace every primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging that you put on the European market. And so you have to put on the packaging an on-pack information that shows the serial number, for instance, the batch number, the type number, and that shows also the manufacturer's name on the trademark and the postal address. I mean, this should be something that it's not new actually, because it's already the case. I mean, in Europe already, we when we buy packaging, we have this information. So it should not be so tricky, but just ensure that I mean, when I speak with my clients, they told me that this is something that is systematically done for primary packaging, but not really always for tertiary packaging. Now you have to do this also for tertiary, secondary, and primary packaging. So ensure that you have all this information. You can put a QR code or not, up to you, but this information has to be present on the packaging. Then you have to ensure that you are registered in any national EPR register. So where you sell, of course, your packaging. So for instance, let's assume that you sell your packaging in France. Just ensure that you are registered in the CTO register, so in the national French EPR system. Again, nothing really new, because you should be already registered, because if you sell a packaging in a European country where there is an EPR system, you pay the fees in this EPR system, so you are already registered. But it's clear now, this is clearly written in PPWR, and that's something that you should, of course, verify, just that it's everything is on track and that you are registered. And we recommend, I mean, even if it's not mandatory, but we recommend to put in place a procedure that enable you to recall any non-conforming packaging if put on the market after 12 August 2026. Because on this, again, European Commission, it's very clear. By the way, on the June 5th, so really few days ago, European Commission published another document clarifying a few things, and they say clearly that all packaging put on the market, on the European market after this date must comply with the requirement. Because the question was, do we have some days, buffer days, I don't know, 10 days where we can still not be compliant with the PPWR? And no, they were clear. So if you put this packaging on the European market, let's say on the 11th of August, no problem, you don't need to be compliant. But if you put this packaging on the 12th, you must be compliant. So this really, there is no idea to have to postpone any deadline or to provide any buffer. I wanted to deep dive a bit on this documentation that you must prepare by 12th of August. So you have to prepare, as I said, the technical documentation, which is called the Module A also in PPWR. It's a self-certification routine that contains all the relevant information for your packaging. So it's important that you in this context that you ask those relevant documentation to your suppliers, because often it's a documentation that you don't have in-house. So you have to ask this to your suppliers. You have to store it somewhere. And most importantly, so you have really to organize well this documentation, because you have to prepare this documentation by packaging type. And so probably if you are selling different SKUs, and most probably you are selling different packaging types. I'm working with companies that are selling thousands of SKUs. So you can imagine that they are working with thousands suppliers, different suppliers. So this data collection step, it's not. I mean, you don't have to underestimate this step. It's a relevant step that will take time. It's important to do because you have to store well all your documentation, and you have to ask all the relevant information to your suppliers. What is important is that indeed, so it's, I mean, by 12 August, you have just to collect one information about the chemicals, so the substances of concern. So you don't need to, of course, you need to launch the data collection now, but you don't need to collect all your data by 12 August. Also because it will be very complicated. Just focus for the moment on the chemicals. And then you will have time in the next month to collect all the other information for the other targets present in PPWR. Just let me also add, of course, that you will receive these slides after the webinar, because there is a lot of content. I'm not reading the full content because otherwise it will be really, very boring, and we will need much more time. But you will have these slides, and these, on these slides, really, we tried to translate in an easy way the content of PPWR, which is quite long and quite complicated to sometimes to understand. So in this case, of course, so here you have also an internal production control procedure of this. On this slide, this is reported in PPWR. So, of course, what you need to do, in few words, so you have to, as I said, collect all the relevant information from your suppliers. You have checked that you have all the relevant documentation. So you are responsible of collecting the relevant information. So that's very important. And why I'm saying this, because sometimes I have some clients that are asking me, oh, can I just send an email to my supplier and ask him by email if they have any chemicals in my packaging? Well, that's not sufficient, because PPWR is asking to collect the relevant documentation, and you are responsible of this, of the quality of this documentation. So my recommendation to you is to ask for certifications if they are available. If not, no worries, but you need at least a self-declaration by the supplier. So it can be just one document with, the logo of the supplier, but it is really, it's important that it's something more official than a simple email. Also for you to, in case there are any controls, and that this is really your responsibility. So to collect the information in the right format. And then also what PPWR say that it's your responsibility also to put in-house measures in place so that indeed you manage correctly all the information, you store them, and if something is missing, you put in place the correct procedure to collect the information, and then also to ensure that you are respecting the targets in PPWR. So in some cases, it will be necessary to do some eco-design changes to your packaging. And in this case, it's up to you to discuss with the suppliers to work on these eco-design changes. And that's why in some cases it's taking time. So that's why it's important that on some targets, for instance, recyclability, you start working now, even if we have the target only in 2030. Well, only it's in 4 years, so it's not so I mean, it's quite early actually. Then I'm showing you also an example of declaration of conformity as we have in PPWR. So you see, it's one page. This is something that where indeed you have to identify the number of the packaging, you have to identify the number of the manufacturer. So that's important. The manufacturer in PPWR, it's the one putting on the European Union the packaging. So it's not the produce, I mean, it's not the one producing the packaging. So that's in this case, if you company, you are selling products again in France, so in a European country, you are identified as manufacturer. Your suppliers are the ones producing the packaging. You have to collect the relevant data from your suppliers, and you have to do this declaration of conformity, where you will write that your company is putting this packaging on the European country, and then you are responsible for its conformity towards PPWR. This declaration, you have to just to say that you have done all the necessary assessment, that you are compliant with PPWR. So you declare that you know PPWR, that you are compliant with the targets, and that you are compliant, of course, with any other standards or I mean, a regulation is existing in Europe on packaging. So this is something, as soon as you have a template, I must say that this is something quite easy to be done. But of course, behind this, there is a lot of work more in collecting data and managing the data to show your compliance with PPWR. Here you have also additional information about declaration of conformity. In particular, the question that I receive often is, how many declaration of conformity I have to do? Do I need to do it for all my SKUs? So what PPWR says is that you have to do a declaration of conformity by packaging type. Then the question is, what is a packaging type? What PPWR says is that whenever you have some characteristics which are different from one packaging type to another, and those characteristics affect PPWR targets, then in this case, you have to do separate different declaration of conformity. Let me just give you a concrete example. You have two packaging with which are exactly the same material, same color, same material and same size. Let's assume that you have two colors different. One is transparent and the other one is black. So in this case, the packaging is exactly the same. Just one is, I don't know, for marketing reason, one is transparent and one is black. And of course, the color is a key parameter when we consider recyclability of packaging. So for instance, often transparent plastic packaging is recyclable. Black plastic packaging is not recyclable. So those two packaging, they have a different behavior towards one key target in PPWR, which is the recyclability target. In this case, according to PPWR, these are two different packaging types. You must do two different declaration of conformity. If you have, for instance, it happens often that you have exactly the same packaging, same color, same materials, with just small differences in terms of size. For instance, I don't know, one is, I don't know, you have, let's talk about, to make it easier, about PET bottles. One is half a liter PET bottle, and the other one is 50 milliliter PET bottle. So in this case, the PET bottles are exactly the same materials, same design, same color, everything the same, just a different size. Well, in this case, the difference in terms of size, it's not affecting any you are sure that it's not affecting any targets. You have also to ensure that it does not affect, of course, the targets on packaging minimization, because you have also target on empty space. But if you are sure that indeed it's not affecting any targets, then in this case, you can do the same declaration of conformity. My recommendation is whenever you are not really sure about whether it's they are really the same packaging type, you have some doubts, just follow a conservative approach. So do separate declaration of conformity so that you don't have any issues then in the future. So it's better always to follow a conservative approach when talking about PPWR. Then now let's do a PPWR deep dive. Of course, I'm checking the time because I want to start by 11:30 with the Q&A. But we are on track, we are on time. So I want to start again with this definition that we already seen about what is packaging according to PPWR. So we already saw the generic definition. We have 7 categories defined in the regulation, which are sales packaging, grouped packaging, transport packaging, service packaging. So service packaging is also any item filled at points of sales, like bags, cups, food containers. These are all part of PPWR and are considered packaging. Then you have also indeed items, packaging that are really designed to be filled only at the point of sales, like bags. So this definitely, the bag is also packaging that is under PPWR. Then any tea, coffee, beverage bags, single-serve unit, coffee pots. That's something really that was quite new, because for the first time we have a packaging regulation that is saying explicitly that coffee pots, tea bags are packaging and they must comply with PPWR. And so these are examples of packaging which are under PPWR. There are other, then in annex, you can find also other examples about, in particular, for instance, whether you are unsure whether it's product or packaging. For instance, I was talking before about the CD cases, but you have also other examples like flower pots. These are a part of the product, so they are not packaging. But then there are many other examples where it's unclear whether it's product or packaging. For instance, also the hangers, the hangers that are used to sell textiles. So this is considered packaging according to PPWR. So there are still some unclear definition, but you have a lot of examples, concrete examples, even in the regulation. So to clarify in which case it's packaging and in which case it's not packaging. But of course, that's first a question to ask yourself, is it packaging or not? Then if it's packaging, it's under PPWR. Let's start with this topic on labeling. This refers to Articles 12 and 13 in PPWR. So the target on labeling, it applies starting from 12 August 2028. And so you have still some time. It applies to all sales packaging. It applies to all, actually, of course, primary packaging, but it applies also to e-commerce shipment. And it does not apply to outer wooden transport crate in case of B2B transport, because that's another thing that it's important to consider. So B2B packaging is included in PPWR, unless there are some exceptions, like indeed any wooden transport crates. So these wooden transport crates are, if they are used for B2B transport and they are not part of e-commerce, they are not under PPWR. But in general, so let me say that there are very few exceptions of packaging that is not under PPWR. And those exceptions, they only apply to really mainly tertiary packaging, so really logistic packaging. And so in general, all packagings is under PPWR. And in this, so you have to ensure that these labels are, I mean, the correct labels are displayed on your packaging. Article 13 is also speaking about bins, waste bins on company sites. Of course, only in case you have sites in Europe. So if you don't have company sites in Europe, then you don't have to comply with this. But otherwise, if you have manufacturing sites in Europe, keep in mind that your waste bins will need also to display pictograms, labels according to PPWR. Now, these harmonized European icons, we have a draft document that has been already published by JRC, the Joint Research Center in Europe, but we don't have yet the delegated acts. The delegated act should come in a few weeks. So my suggestion is let's wait for the delegated act before doing any change to the labels on your packaging. Because indeed we still don't know exactly how this will affect your packaging. For instance, here you have some examples. So we know, we are almost sure. There are some things that is where we are almost sure, but still there is something which is still unclear about indeed the labeling on your packaging. But what we know is that in case your packaging is reusable, and only in this case, you must provide the information about the reuse system and track rotations via a digital label or QR code. So by scanning this QR code, the consumer will have all the information about system operator, how to return the reusable packaging, and also the number of rotation. So just writing returnable packaging is not enough. And it could be even misleading under PPWR if there is no return system. So for example, let's assume that you have a packaging and you assume that it's reused, but you are not sure because there is no collection of your packaging, there is no reuse system. Well, in this case, you can't write that it's a returnable packaging. You can't assume that it's a returnable packaging. A packaging, if it's returnable, if it's reusable, you have to ensure that there is a system to collect it back. So, and you have also to track the number of rotation. We will see this also later when talking about reusable packaging. Then there are other information like the recycled content, any material certifications which are optional. What it's mandatory, it's a material composition. But that's already the case in some European countries. So in some European countries are already requesting that you write the material composition. Now this will be harmonized across all European countries. What it's forbidden it's to use any label marks which are not approved by the European Commission. So probably this label now that it's called the Mobius one. Most probably it will be forbidden because the European Commission has already identified it as misleading. So probably we will not find it anymore on our packaging, but we will find the idea is really to help the consumer to understand how to handle this packaging. So in the case if it's reusable or in the case if it's needs to be wasted, can it be recycled or not? So the goal of this really Article 12 is really to help consumers and also to provide a more transparent and harmonized communication on all European packaging. Today, for instance, it happens often that I mean, if we buy, for instance, a packaging in France, we have recommendations on how to where to put the waste, so the packaging after use. But those recommendations does not apply to any other country. For instance, maybe a packaging that has to be put in the recyclable stream in France, maybe it's not recycled in Italy, and so the same recommendations does not apply. So the goal is really to harmonize all this and to simplify the life to consumers, not maybe to companies, but to consumers for sure. Then let me jump to these articles 10, 24, and 25, which are related to packaging minimization and format restriction. What we know is that we have some qualitative minimization targets, and we have also some quantitative minimization target, because first, every company has to do a sort of assessment of packaging minimization, which is qualitative. So really, PPWR is providing steps that you have to comply with to ensure that you have done everything to reduce your packaging at maximum. And by the way, so I will show you that the next step of this project will be really to support you in collecting the right information. So we have prepared for you a data collection sheet. And in this data collection sheet, you will find all these steps, and you will be guided step by step on how to do this qualitative assessment on your packaging. There are also quantitative targets. So there is also an empty space ratio, so that is set as 50%. How this empty space ratio is calculated, it's a division between the empty volume and the total pack volume. Now, the difficulty is how to calculate the volume in case of shapes which are not regular. So in case you have a primary packaging with a strange shape, how you should calculate this volume. So we are waiting for a delegated act on really the formula to use in case of not regular shape. My recommendation for the moment is, again, to use a conservative approach. So always try to, for instance, if you have a not regular shape, you have to approximate your calculation. You have to calculate then an approximative volume, which is actually bigger than the volume that you have, so that you are conservative in the calculation of your empty space. And then 50%, based on really of the work that I've done with my clients, is not so tricky in most of the cases. It can be just an issue for luxury packaging. Luxury packaging, where you have a lot of packaging that is not needed. You have a big packaging, then maybe these targets can be tricky. But for all the other cases, usually it's not complicated to reach this target. You have also some single-use format bans, so that's important. You have, for instance, some of these single-use plastic bans that don't apply really to companies, that apply mainly to restaurants, takeaways, and supermarkets. But you have also some single-use plastic bans that they apply to companies. And for instance, I have also a slide on to provide you example of these plastic bans. But before jumping to this slide, I wanted to give you really more information about these empty space requirements. You have all the details here about indeed this empty space requirement that we have in Article 10 and Article 24. And also, so on the left on this slide, you have the PPWR requirements, and on the right, you have a translation of these PPWR requirements in a language that is easier to understand, but also, so you have a summary. And what I wanted just to highlight is that this empty space ratio applies again to all packaging, primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging. So I'm saying this because sometimes companies, they don't track the volumes in their tertiary packaging. And well, you have to consider now and this, and you have to be sure that you optimize also the filling of your tertiary packaging in order to really to minimize the empty space at maximum. And I wanted to also to just one thing that to add. You see a picture on this slide. And this is, I mean, something that you know for sure that it's used in logistic. It's an example of tertiary packaging, of filling, and actually, it is, I mean, all this type of filling, it doesn't account on your empty space. So it means that if you put, for instance, polystyrene on this or this type of bags to fill spaces, then this is counted as empty space in PPWR. So even if you are putting some filling, so actually the goal of PPWR is really to reduce the use of this filling material. So just pay attention that whenever you calculate this ratio, all these filling material are not counting as volume. So they are counting as empty space, and they are impacting on your empty space ratio. I'm jumping then on this which is indeed a tricky target that's about recyclability. This is dealt by Article 6 in PPWR. So so the goal of this regulation is really to classify all packaging in different recyclability groups, categories, A, B, C, D. And these are categories of that highlights the recyclability of your packaging per packaging unit in weight. So what it means? It means that if my packaging is in category A, it means that more than 95% in weight of my packaging weight is designed to be recyclable. I have just 5%, 4% of my packaging weight that is not designed to be recyclable. If I'm in category D, it means that my packaging, so the less than 70% of the weight of my packaging is designed to be recyclable. And in this case, you are not allowed to put this packaging on the European market starting from 2030. So category D is banned from 2030. But starting from 2038, even category C will be banned. And you will be able to put on the market only categories A and B. Now, how to assess, of course, recyclability? Then that's another question, because we are still waiting for the delegated act on design for recycling criteria. This will arrive only in 2028. The first target applies in 2030. It's not enough. I'm working with companies that are telling me I need more than 5 years to change my packaging, to do any eco design in my packaging. So I need to know now if my packaging is not recyclable or not. So my recommendation is to do this recyclability assessment today, to start as soon as possible by using the guidelines that are available on the market. And I can give you also some suggestions on which guidance to use. But keep in mind that as soon as we'll have those delegated acts, you will need to update again your assessment by using those new design for recycling criteria. And so, yes, you will need to do an update, but hopefully your results will not change a lot. Then in 2035, you know that also all packaging must be recyclable at scale. So in this case, we are not speaking about the design for recycling. We are speaking about recyclability scale. So you as company has to be sure that there is a recycling and collection stream for your packaging. If it's not existing, you can't put this packaging on the European market. This is what PPWR says. Then, of course, how to apply this criteria, that's the challenge. Because, as I said before, there is a lot of plastic packaging that is not collected, that is not recycled at scale today. There is also a clear definition of what it means at scale. There is also the PPWR is really speaking about a clear percentage of the clear percentage of European population that has to let's say to access actually the collection and recycling stream for this specific material in Europe. So it means, so if we come back to design for recycling, as I told you before, so we don't have the delegated act, but we have some guidelines existing today. There are specific, so you have to ensure that the packaging that you are using is recyclable. And for this, you can just simply ask your suppliers to do recyclability test. So you can ask, okay, do the recyclability test and tell me that, I'm sure that this packaging is recyclable. In some cases, they have no recyclability test. So in this case, you can ask a self-declaration from your supplier, or you could even ask for the data to do your recyclability assessment. But those data are very, very specific. They are related to the presence of additives, labels, sleeve adhesives, inks. So all these aspects affect recyclability. So doing a recyclability assessment by yourself, it's quite time consuming. You can, because actually we are working with companies today that decided to do their own recyclability assessment. So they decide to collect these criteria, these data from suppliers. These are, of course, big companies, and they prefer to do this recyclability assessment on their own. But you have also the possibility just to ask your supplier to take the responsibility to ensure that this is recyclable. Otherwise, you won't be able to put indeed the packaging on the European market anymore. You have on this slide the recyclability at scale definition that I was mentioning before. So you see there are specific percentage. So actually PPWR say that packaging waste, which is collected separately, sorted and recycled in installed infrastructure in the European level, so you will need to ensure an annual quantity of recycled material equal to or greater than 30% for wood and 55% for all the other materials. It includes packaging waste that is exported from the Union for the purpose of waste management. So these are the thresholds. So in few words, if you are selling a plastic packaging in Europe, you have to ensure that in the 55% of your packaging is collected and recycled in any infrastructure existing in Europe. The big question here that we don't know is what happens to many plastic materials like PVC, like PS, which are not collected and recycled today. And then my idea, honestly, is that probably they will do some derogation for those materials, or they will, push a lot in the coming years the development of chemical recycling in Europe. But by pushing a lot, it means that really, of course, countries, they need support, they need money to really to build a chemical recycling infrastructure in Europe, and then to ensure that plastic packaging in particular, is collected and recycled in those countries. It's not easy, so I don't think that honestly it will be feasible by 2035. So we are all waiting for this delegated act also on the recyclability at scale. I just want to give you a snapshot of what guidelans you could use. What I suggest today for to assess the recyclability of your plastic packaging, you could use the Recyclas methodology. Recyclas is it's a European organization on plastic recyclability. They provide for free publicly guidelines on really how to design your plastic packaging in order to make it recyclable. They have many criteria in those guidelines, which are indeed including additives, inks, materials, many other criteria. These guidelines are what we know because of course, we are following the development of these design for recycling guidelines at European level. What we know is that the guidelines from Europe, they will be less stricter than the Recyclas methodology. It means that if you are compliant with the Recyclas today, for sure you will be compliant with the European guidelines. So the Recyclas methodology is much more strict, is much more conservative. So we think that that's a good methodology to use at first to have this indeed a first idea on the recyclability of your packaging. And here you have some information about this methodology, but I invite you to go online and to check really for the Recyclas guidelines, and so that where you have all the detailed guidelines. These are only for plastics. Then there are other guidelines for paper, for instance, and for paper, I suggest to use the Forever Green guidelines, and these are also public available. But I would say that the most complicated packaging component is really plastic in terms of recyclability, and so these are very good guidelines to use. We have here some possible implications in terms of recyclability. Most probably multi-layer packaging, which are not recyclable, not separable, they will be forbidden. All small packaging which has a size lower than 5 centimeter will be most probably restricted, because actually that's not recyclable according to the guidelines. I say, as you see on the slide, I say may be restricted because again, we are still waiting for the delegated act. So let's see if they put a different threshold. But today, everything that has a size lower than 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter, it's not recyclable. And then indeed, there are some materials that, like foams, that will be probably banned and forbidden. And then what happens to flexible films? We don't know. I don't think that they will be forbidden because we need flexible films. But the reality is that they are not recycled today. So again, we don't know. It may be that there are some derogations for some materials. Otherwise, we can't just stop using some plastic materials like this. What I wanted to say also that, by the way, speaking about films, there are already some alternatives, indeed, that you can find on the market. And for instance, for the films, the wrap films for pallets, you can already find on the market some reusable solutions. So probably they will be scaled. We are seeing these solutions are really developing and present more and more on the market, really to align on PPWR. Minimum recycled content in plastic packaging, Article 7. So this target applies only to plastic packaging, and it applies only to post-consumer recycled. So when we talk about recycled content in PPWR, we refer only to PCR. That's very important. And we have some threshold that you can see here on this slide. They depend really on the type of packaging. And we have two horizon time. So one in 2030 and one in 2040. For contact-sensitive plastics, we have the lowest threshold. For beverage bottles, we have higher recycled content. Again, so based on what I've seen most companies are working with, they are already, they don't see these targets as so tricky. The only thing is really how to, I mean, for beverage bottle, it's easy to find the recycled content. It will be much more complicated for other plastic packaging actually to find the recycled content. So the question that I often receive is chemically recycled content included? Yes, it's included because PPWR is only mentioning PCR, but it does not make any difference between mechanically recycled and chemically recycled. And then also what European Commission has said is that by increasing the recycling at end of life of packaging in Europe, they think that we will have more recycled plastic available on the market. We'll see if that's true or not. Because I know that some clients already told me that probably, today it's tricky to keep, to follow to keep actually to reach the 35 target for plastic that is not non-PT. But we will see. Here we have some concrete examples, but indeed that's something that I already mentioned. Of course, it applies to all plastic packaging. Only plastic, but all plastic packaging. Primary, secondary, tertiary. You have some recycling methods listed indeed as set for PCR, as I mentioned. So both mechanical and chemical recycling are accepted under the PPWR. We are still waiting for more recommendation, but for the moment we have no evidence that European Commission is not including chemical recycling. Otherwise, I think that for food packaging, this will be very complicated to reach this target. So most probably, indeed, chemical recycling is, of course, included. And you have all the additional information about really contact sensitive packaging and also on verification and assessment criteria. Keep in mind that we are speaking about post-consumer recycled. So PIR, post-industrial recycled, does not count for recycled content. Only post-consumer recycled content. Reusable packaging. We have also targets on reusable packaging that applies to primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging. We have mainly targets. So for you, because for companies, we have mainly targets that apply to transport packaging and grouped packaging. So what it means, of course, we have also targets on primary packaging, but mainly for takeaways, restaurants. We have targets on primary packaging for beverage bottles. Now let's focus on this transport packaging. In this case, you have a threshold of 40% reusable transport packaging by 2030, 70% by 2040. And this includes pallets, film wraps, any transport packaging. Then you have also targets for grouped packaging. And these, you have 10% targets and 25% targets. So this is, it means it assesses, maybe it is related to the shrink wrap. So the LDP films that you use to group packaging, and in this case, you will need really to ensure that 10% by 2030 is reusable. And there are then also indeed also some other reusable targets, as I said, related to takeaway restaurants and related to beverage bottles. So really drink bottles, beer bottles, or any other type of bottles actually. Now I wanted to focus now really because we have indeed I want to have enough time for your questions. Just let me conclude with this slide. What are companies doing now? So what we suggest to do is first to meet actually with this target deadline of 12 August. And then to do this, once that you have collected your data on the substances of concern, once that you have started to draft your declaration of conformity, then you can start with these steps that you have on this slide. So you should, according to PPWR, do a gap assessment, do a gap assessment of your entire packaging portfolio. And then you should understand, you have to check how far you are from meeting the targets of PPWR in 2030, 2038, 2040. And based on this, of course, I mean, first to do this gap assessment, of course, you have to collect all the relevant information. And the good news is that we have prepared for you a document to help you to collect those data. Then you have to do your gap assessment, and then you have to identify your hotspot. So you have to understand what are the areas, the packaging types where you are not at target, because for sure there will be packaging type that are not at target with the PPWR. In this case, you have to plan a roadmap. So the corrective actions to enable you to reach those targets, PPWR targets, on time. And then it means that you have to define an action plan, an internal strategy. You have to define, in some cases, also packaging policy. Some cases of companies, they have already internal packaging policy, and you have to update this internal packaging policy by including all the targets from PPWR. You have to engage your internal stakeholders, because it's important that the different departments are on board. I'm working currently mainly with different departments. So procurement department, it's key because they are working with suppliers, and you have to have your suppliers on board. Keep in mind that many small suppliers, they are not aware of PPWR today. So the big ones, of course, they are ready, they are aware. But I'm working today with many small suppliers, in particular the ones that are not European based, that are maybe based in Asia. They don't know PPWR. So you have to engage them. You have to make them understand that you have these targets in Europe to be compliant with, and they have to, as a supplier, also to give you packaging that is compliant with PPWR. Then internally, when we talk about internal stakeholders, I'm working a lot, of course, with sustainability departments, also with marketing. Marketing is another key stakeholder because you have to change the design of your packaging sometimes. You have to put labels on your packaging. So it's important that they are also aware about this. And of course, regulatory affair, your legal department, because this is a regulation, it's legally binding, the regulation. So you have many stakeholders that need to be engaged internally. And then you have to keep track of your strategy. You have to update regularly your declaration of conformity as soon as there are new targets entering into force. The next steps on this project, keep in mind that I will visit some of the companies in Serbia and in North Macedonia, and we will share with you those data collection file, which is I know that you can't read anything on this slide, but this is just to show you how it looks like. It's a big file where you have for each article, you have an explanation of the data that you need to collect, and you are really guided. So we tried really to do this in the most transparent and user-friendly way, so that you can be totally independent in collecting this data. You have to engage with your suppliers, and you have to ask your suppliers most of this data, because most probably most of the data are data that you don't have internally, that you have never collected internally. Then you have also a checklist that we prepared for you. So it's a compliance checklist with all the relevant questions and all the relevant tasks that you have to do according to the different deadline. Focus for the moment on the August 2026. You have already a lot of tasks actually to do before 2026. Focus on this, and then you have all the task that you have to do by 2030, by 2040. Again, it is an Excel file that you can keep internally to update it, and as soon as to check indeed to update it with the status. So really to check that you are on track with the different targets and with the actions that you need to foresee to comply with PPWR. This was actually my last slide. Now it's good because we have 30 minutes really to focus on your questions. So I hope that we have questions. Let me just check the. I'm sorry. So I wanted to check the chat, but I can't read the chat. I can't see your chat for the moment. Maybe because I'm full screen. Let me just stop sharing. I'm sorry. I will stop sharing and then I will share again. So yeah, I can see the chat now. So we'll check take some randomly some questions. First, the easiest one. Can we get the PPWR compliance checklist? Of course. This was a document that we prepared for you. So the data collection sheet and the compliance checklist together with these slides will be shared with you. And then of course, I'm checking only the questions that have been translated in English. Another point that I see that it's written, and it's true. So for all the questions that I can't address during the webinar, they will be collected, and indeed they will be answered after offline. Where can we check whether our primary packaging is recyclable? Let's start from this question, which is it's a quite complex. It's an easy question, but with a complex answer, because actually, indeed. So what you need to do to assess the recyclability of our packaging today is really to use the existing recyclability guidelines. So I mentioned Recyclass. For Recyclass, it's only for plastic packaging. Recyclass is providing PDF guidelines that you can check for the different plastic packaging. You have also an online tool that you can use for free, and you can test indeed the recyclability of your packaging. The good thing that Recyclass is allows to classify the packaging in 3 categories. The green one is fully compatible, so this packaging is recyclable today. The red one, it means this packaging is not recyclable. The yellow one means this packaging has limited compatibility today. And of course, for the yellow, so the yellow and the red ones are the ones that you need to focus on, to work on, to increase the recyclability score of your packaging. So recyclability is assessed via different data. The easiest way for you is, before starting to collect any data to assess any recyclability, what I recommend you is really to ask your supplier to give you a certification of the recyclability of your packaging. If there is no certification, ask the supplier if they have done a recyclability assessment, and they can give you a self-declaration. So not only an email, but really a self-declaration, a more official self-document where they declare that this packaging is recyclable. If they can't do this, then the last option is for you to collect all the data that are requested by Recyclass. And the data are inks, types, adhesives, labels, of course, the material composition, the weight of the packaging. So in these guidelines and in the Recyclass tool, you have all the data that are requested. This is, of course, only for plastic. Then, as soon as you have paper, you need to check other guidelines. And I suggest to use the Forever Green guidelines, which are indeed clear. It's, again, a PDF document which is listing different types of adhesives, inks, and depending really on the inks that you use on your paper packaging, in some cases it's recyclable, in other cases it's not. And then you have also guidelines for aluminum. For glass, it's more complicated. It's a matter of opacity of the glass. My suggestion, because we do a recyclability assessment internally for our clients, my suggestion always is if your glass packaging is too opaque, for instance, I'm working with clients that they are using black, really black glass. Well, in this case, the black glass, for instance, I'm working with a cosmetic company that they have a perfume with black glass. Well, that's not recyclable for sure. But in general, glass packaging, so the standard ones, the transparent, the green transparent glass, the brown transparent glass, these are all recyclable. So in general, all packaging glass that we use, for instance, for bottles, for beverage bottles, they are recyclable. So it's easy for glass. The more tricky materials are really, I will say, first plastic and then paper to assess the recyclability. And maybe you should start from this packaging to assess the recyclability of your packaging. Then so the question is again about recyclability. I guess because in the case of printed packaging, how are the inks separated from the materials during the recycling process? That's tricky. So there are some inks that are not they are not separated actually. They are really diluted. They are degraded. The inks are degraded usually in the recycling process. And so there are some inks that can't degrade. There are some inks that are really they continue to stay, and they can really also decrease the quality of your recycled material. And so in this case, there are some automatic detection of the packaging and at the entry of the recycling stream, so that as soon as this packaging with those inks, which are mainly metal based inks, enter the recycling stream, they are rejected. So they are really not recycled. They are not accepted because they can really create issues to the quality of the recyclability. And so in this case, but all these recommendations about indeed what type of inks are accepted are, for instance, provided by the Recyclass guidelines. In general, water-based inks are good and they are accepted. So you have really to ask questions to your suppliers whether the inks are water-based or not. As I said, most of the suppliers they are aware actually about this, so they know already that there are some inks that are better than others, but it really depends on where your supplier is based. Because I'm working with some suppliers in China, they have no clue about this, but I'm working also with the big suppliers in Europe, and they all know, they are all aware about this, and they are trying to avoid this kind of inks. So it depends on the supplier, and what I suggest is it's always to check these guidelines. Now, since we don't have the official guidelines from the European Commission, so starting from 1st January 2028, we will have the official guidelines, and of course, this will be your document, your guidance that you will need to follow. Then I'm interested to know whether there will be any changes to the current migration test on the basis of which declaration of conformity are issues. I'm not sure to understand these questions. So I think that probably you are speaking about migration test from substances of concern, of chemicals to your product. So from the packaging, so for instance, a migration test related to PFAS from packaging to product. So what we know is that the European Commission has just released, this a few weeks ago, a document on the 5th of June, where indeed they were also speaking about tests on how to assess chemicals of substances and PFAS in your packaging. And they said that there are different tests existing today for PFAS, for instance, PFAS measurement, that there is no official test yet. And so they just say use one of these tests for the moment that are existing in Europe. So they don't plan to do any. Their answers was more, you will be aligned if you use any of the tests existing today in Europe. But we plan, as the European Commission, to give you more information by the end of the year. So by the end of the year, they will provide more information about what tests to use for PFAS and heavy metals. For the moment, so as you can imagine, the deadline is already 12 August, so we will not have this information by the 12th of August. So, but at the same time, European Commission has said use any test any lab test that are used in Europe today, and any of these will be good to test your level of in concentration of heavy metals and PFAS. I hope that I understood your question and that this question was related to the chemical of concerns. Otherwise, please write in the chat if it was something different. Then for exporters using ASPM 15 treated wooden pallets and crates, how will PPWR interact with existing phytosanitary requirements? Will there be any new obligation regarding reuse, recyclability, or documentation beyond current? So you have indeed reusability targets for tertiary packaging, and those applies to all importation, so to all materials packaging that is imported in Europe, unless you have, of course, if for safety reason. For I don't know, for any reason that you can justify, but when I talk about a reason, indeed, I'm referring to safety for contact sensitive packaging. You can't use reusable packaging, then that's okay. Indeed, as you saw, European Commission is not asking that 100% of your packaging is reusable. You have some targets. And in those targets, of course, you have to apply them to the packaging whenever it's feasible. Whenever, for safety reason, you can't use reusable packaging, in this case, you have to, of course, to demonstrate it. So you have to demonstrate that you need this packaging to ensure the quality, to preserve the quality of your product, or to ensure that the safety of your product, and then you can continue to use it. And that's a good example. For instance, for pharma companies, there are a lot of exemptions in PPWR exactly for this. So PPWR, for instance, recyclability targets or recycle targets, they don't apply to pharma companies for primary packaging, they don't apply, and to any contact sensitive packaging. So whenever you can demonstrate that you need really, PVC, you need really this material to ensure the safety of your packaging, then you can continue to use it. But you have to demonstrate this. That's very important. And so you have exemptions for contact sensitive packaging. And so for safety reasons, you have also some derogations for contact sensitive packaging. We tried really to outline these derogations and these exemptions in the slides. And they mainly applied indeed to food packaging and of course to pharma, to any medical product, even pet food product. I'm interested to know whether I, as a manufacturer of cardboard packaging, can issue my declaration of conformity based on the supplier declarations for the paper and adhesive, accompanied by a statement confirming that we do not alter the chemical properties of the product during our manufacturing process. For example, during the processing of the raw materials. I would only add that the cardboard packaging is placed on the market as transport or secondary packaging. So that's so we have to. So first, let's come back to definition of manufacturer. If a company, it's a packaging, producer. So you are, if I understand correctly, so you are producing cardboard packaging, paper cardboard packaging. If you are putting this packaging as a standalone product in Europe for the first time, so I'm a packaging that producer that is selling cardboard packaging standalone without any product inside, and I'm the first one that I'm putting this type of cardboard packaging in Europe, then I'm the responsible for the declaration of conformity. Because in this case, my product, the product that I'm selling, it's packaging. So it's really the cardboard box. But let's assume that you are a packaging producer, you give your packaging, sell your packaging, I don't know, to Nestlé, just to give to make a name, but it can be any other brand, but to a food company, to a Nestlé, you are selling this packaging to Nestlé. Nestlé is, of course, putting their product in your packaging, and then Nestlé is putting the product plus the packaging on the European market. It's Nestlé that is responsible of doing the declaration of conformity of the packaging. So often I receive the question, how can I understand who needs to do the declaration of conformity in this case? Well, one good tip is to consider what is the brand on the packaging. For instance, I'm Nestlé. I'm buying my packaging from a packaging producer, and I put my brand, the Nestlé brand, on the packaging. I put the product inside the packaging, and I sell everything in Europe. I am the one responsible for the declaration of conformity. I am the one responsible to collect the relevant data from the supplier, including the packaging producer, so the company that sold me the cardboard box. Then sometimes I also heard some companies that were telling me, I don't want to give all this data to my clients in order so that they can do declaration of conformity. I prefer to do the declaration of conformity by myself and just giving them the declaration of conformity. That's not the standard procedure, but of course you can. So you could, for instance, do the declaration of conformity yourself and giving them the declaration of conformity. But keep in mind that then they have to do another declaration of conformity too. And since they are the one putting the product plus the packaging on the European market, they need to do this declaration of conformity. They will, of course, relate in the declaration of conformity to your declaration of conformity. So probably, I don't know, again, in the case of Nestlé, on their declaration of conformity, they will need to write, I'm Nestlé, I'm responsible of this packaging put on the market. I declare that my packaging is compliant with PPWR, and I provide this technical annex to prove actually that I'm compliant. In the technical annex, they will need to include your declaration of conformity, where you declare that you did all the gap assessment, all the relevant analysis to ensure that the packaging is compliant. So that's also a thing that you could do. But keep in mind that as packaging producer, if you sell your packaging to a brand owner, and it's the brand owner that is putting it on the European market, it's a brand owner that is responsible of doing the declaration of conformity according to PPWR. I hope that I was clear and that I gave enough. We have another question I see regarding the Nestlé example. If Nestlé asks for its supplier of cardboard transport packaging DOC, then the supplier must ask for DOC from the paper manufacturer from which they made the box. You don't need to ask. So Nestlé can ask the DOC to the paper, the cardboard producer, but you don't. I mean, according to PPWR, it's not you that needs to do this DOC. So you could also tell Nestlé, I don't need to do the DOC because that's not requested by PPWR, but you have to provide all the relevant information to Nestlé so that they can do this DOC by themselves. When I say all the relevant information, You have to provide all the certification, for instance, of recyclability of your packaging, all the tests that you have done, all the information related to the composition of your packaging. And if you don't have this information internally, yes, you need to ask them to your supplier. So in some cases, for instance, you are producing the cardboard, and of course, you are supplying your paper for someone else, and then you need information that you don't have internally. And then, yes, you have to go up into your supply chain and to ask those information to your suppliers. So it's your responsible to collect the information from your suppliers and to give the relevant information to your clients. And then it's the responsibility of your clients to put together all this information and to do the declaration of conformity. So really the question is always about who needs to do declaration of conformity. And so if to answer this question, you have really to ask yourself, am I the one that is putting this packaging on the European market for the first time with my own brand on it? If so, yes, you have to do the declaration of conformity. In some cases, you are probably we have also cases of companies that are putting on the European market products packaging with the brands from other companies. In this case, those companies are acting as distributor, so they are distributing packaging in Europe. So they don't need to do the declaration of conformity in this case, but they need to ask the declaration of conformity to the brands owners that made this, that prepared this packaging, so that they are ready, they have all the documentation in case of any controls. So I hope that I was clear on this, because that's indeed a tricky point. The first question is always to understand who needs to do the declaration of conformity. Do water-based adhesives need to have a recyclability certificate, or is the recyclability test required for the finished products, such as bags, box? So first, actually PPWR is not requiring any certification, is asking you to test the recyclability of your packaging. So how do you do your test? Either you pay someone else to test your packaging, or so really there are tests done in recycling stream by certifiers. They take your packaging, they do tests in different recycling streams, and then they give you really a recyclability test, a recyclability certificate. That's one possibility. Or you collect all the relevant data to do an assessment by yourself without any test, by following existing eco-design criteria. So the guidelines that I was mentioning before, Recyclass and so on. And in this case, among the relevant data that you need to collect, we have also the water-based adhesives. So we need to understand what type of adhesives you are using. And this is one of the questions that actually you will find in those guidelines. So these guidelines will tell you if you are using these types of adhesive, then your packaging is recyclable. If you are using these types of adhesives, then your packaging is not recyclable. This is what these guidelines will tell you. And so in order to answer all these questions, you need, yes, to understand what type of adhesives you are using. If you don't have this information internally, you have to ask your suppliers, but you have to have this information. So you don't have to have a recyclability certificate on adhesives. Also because usually you don't have a recyclability certificate on adhesives. So the recyclability certificate or any test, any assessment is done on a finished product, because it's not just a matter of adhesive when we talk about recyclability. It's maybe in terms of adhesive, you are using the right ones, but then you have a color that hinder recyclability of your packaging. Or you have your packaging, it's a multi-layer packaging, you are combining different types of plastics, and then it's not recyclable. So even if you are using good adhesives, at the end your packaging is not recyclable. So the recyclability has to be done as level of the finish product. I see that there is still a question on declaration of conformity. So if we produce a product for a large market like PL, and it places it on the market, who is responsible for preparing the declaration of conformity? So if you are producing this, so if you are placing by yourself this product on the European market, so you are directly selling it is on the European market, like, I don't know, in e-commerce, or really because you are directly selling these to retailers in European market, then you are responsible of the declaration of conformity. So even if you are giving this to a distributor that is putting this, like for instance, I don't know, to Amazon, you are giving this to Amazon that is selling this to then in Europe, then well, it's you as a brand owner that needs to do the declaration conformity. Probably Amazon will ask you at some point for this declaration conformity, and you will be ready to give this declaration of conformity. Because what I said is that the declaration of conformity, by the way, it's really a public document, so it's meant to be shared with whoever will ask for this. While the technical appendix, all the technical documentation behind the declaration of conformity, it's documentation that needs to be in-house in case there are controls by the governments, by the authorities. So if there are any controls from authorities, you have to be ready also to display and to show all the technical documentation. Otherwise, you don't have to. But the declaration of conformity, it's a public document, and you have really to share it with whoever is asking you. And so in the case, if it's a distributor, if it's a retailer, so a supermarket, a big supermarket, so in this case, you have to share this with them. So I'm just going up because I think that we have other questions just at the beginning. According to the PPWR, is it mandatory to mark the series of used packaging on the primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging? Or is it sufficient to have a complete record of traceability of the packaging in paper or electronic form via the lot number of the product? Yeah, records of traceability of primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging. So it's important to that you have a system internally in place to track these series, the ID number, the series of different packaging. So in terms of labels on the packaging, you have to put just an identification number. In case where the packaging is reusable, you have to put all the information about how to collect the packaging back, how to track the packaging. Then you have to provide information about the manufacturer of the packaging, so who has placed the packaging. For instance, if you are a brand owner, so you have to provide the information about the brand owner. So on any packaging, for instance, sold by Nestlé in Europe already, you find you know exactly that this packaging has been put on on the market by Nestlé. You have an ID number, so these are the information that you have to display. But then internally, you have indeed to track, to have a system that is keeping track of all these ID numbers. So it can be a digital tool, or it can be just an Excel file, but somewhere where you can find the ID number of the packaging, the product that the packaging is referring to, and then all the information about this type of packaging. So indeed, all the information that are necessary to be compliant with PPWR targets. And these information are related to the composition of the packaging, the recyclability of the packaging, the recycled content, the presence of any chemicals, of any substances of concern. And so all these information, you will find them in the data collection sheet. So this Excel sheet contains all the information that you have to track by packaging type and all the information that are necessary then for you to do also the declaration of the DOC. We have 5 minutes left. I don't know if I have still time to answer one question, so just please, someone from SIPO just interrupt me when I
Yes,
need to stop walking.
yes, we can conclude at noon, so that's fine. We have five more
Okay,
minutes. Thank you.
perfect. There is a question. So, for instance, if the packaging is secondary and tertiary and has no direct contact with food, is it acceptable to the use supplier data concerning PFAS? Take into account that nothing is added to the product to change the supplier data. Is it enough to have supplier DOC and to use those to make a part of our own DOC? So the PFAS target applies only to food packaging, which is in contact with food. So that's important. So indeed, it must have we are talking about primary packaging in contact with food. If you are using, if in case of secondary packaging, which is indeed not in contact with food, then you have just to follow the other chemicals, the other substances of concern targets, so the heavy metal targets, not the PFAS one. PFAS one is really only for food packaging, and it's, by the way, so just keep in mind that anyway, I do think that this PFAS. We know that are really under the radar of European Commission. So for the moment, it applies only for food packaging. I don't exclude that soon in the future it will be extended to other types of packaging, because indeed they all already said in PPWR that there will be delegated acts upcoming on PFAS. And those delegated acts will provide additional information about the test to use to assess PFAS, but also may provide also additional information whether this PFAS target is the right one. So for the moment, we are not talking about a ban of PFAS, but we are talking about a threshold. But I don't exclude that soon European Commission will start talking about really banning PFAS in food packaging, so really putting the threshold to 0. And I don't exclude that they will extend this limit to any type of packaging, for instance, also to cosmetic packaging. So I recommend today really to start tracking PFAS, because there is a lot of debate in Europe around this PFAS, and probably they will be extended this target. So, do you have any suggestions on how a manufacturer should create a DOC for packaging if they use several different packaging materials for their product? PET bottle, PP, cup, label. So, DOC applies to actually to packaging type. So, it means that a packaging type is in the case of a bottle where you have a cup, you have a label, then you have to do a declaration of conformity for the entire packaging type. So really for the bottle plus the label plus the cup. Of course, in the declaration of conformity, you tackle all these packaging components. So whenever you collect data, you have to collect the data by packaging component. Then you have to assemble the different packaging components which are part of the same packaging type, the same primary packaging, and you have to issue a DOC by packaging type. But behind this, there are the level of details that you have to collect is indeed by packaging component. Because you have to ensure that you have to collect data on chemicals for your cup, but also for your bottle and also for your label. You have to collect data on recycled content for your bottle, but also for your cup. And then all these targets, all these thresholds, indeed, they apply to your packaging type. But the level of details and the data that you need to supply is by component. So each component, including it must be treated separately. I hope that so it's noon. So I know that there are many other questions, and we will have indeed time also during the on-site visits actually to tackle some of the to tackle these questions, and I hope that really I will be able to provide much more answers to your questions during these on-site visits. I think that we need to conclude the webinar now. Am I right? So we have finished the
Yes.
time. Okay.
Thank you, Laura. You can conclude it.
So thanks everyone for your participation. Thank you indeed. Thank you for displaying this slide. So please take the time. Take now 1 minute really to share your feedback about this webinar. I hope that it was clear enough. PPWR is a complex topic. It's difficult to really to make it easy and understandable the complexity of PPWR in just 2 hours. But take into account that we'll have then indeed additional time during the on-site visit, and you will receive all the materials, including the checklist and the data collection sheet. Thanks so much for your participation. And I'm looking forward maybe to meeting someone, also some of you during the on-site visits. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day and have a nice weekend ahead. Bye-bye.